Abraham.
Yeah.
So, been thinking a lot lately about what's going on with our young men. When I was young,
You responded to life differently then, and the bag of marbles that you gathered up was different because of your response. We're going to enter just this much. We started to say before we called you up that, well, we'll tell you later. We'll hear from you first because we really want you to feel this.
sure. So when I was a kid, I noticed that, well, first let me just say, so folks don't throw things at me, I am the father of a 26-year-old daughter who I've done everything I could to make sure that she had a good life.
Yeah.
And she does. And she's empowered. And when I was little, all of the valedictorians were boys.
All of the what? Yeah.
And the high schools in America were boys. Most of the kids that got into like Ivy League schools were boys. And most of the heads of the clubs were boys. And blah, 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 blah. And now what I notice is that, I mean, in terms of statistics, 70% of the valedictorians in America now are girls. And
Cut it out. We're playing with you. No, we're not. So that applause was, so we're having a right and wrong conversation here?
so I'm pretty pro-girl. When I was a kid, my mother had this thing on the refrigerator. She had divorced from my dad when I was young.
What we started to say to you before you came to your chair is, and this is not specifically directed at you, but you'll get the sense of why we're saying it to you, is that when you were little and your parents were alcoholics and all they did was fight with each other, you put marbles in your bag. And some of those marbles are still there and still active. Not because they need to be, but because you kept repeating them, so you keep them active. Or when you were a little kid and you went to school, you didn't know it, but your teacher had just entered menopause and she was so grouchy and she hated everyone, mostly children. And it was your first encounter with someone outside your family who was shining a spotlight on you, and you put marbles in your bag. And so what we're talking about is this point of attraction that life has caused you to gather up. And so we just want to put this into this conversation lightly here. The atmosphere that you grew up in caused you to put different marbles in your bag than the atmospheres of the kids today. Everybody has their reasons for the way they feel the way they do. And what complicates it is trying to sort it out with each other. You're not even just trying to sort it out with the generations that currently exist. You're trying to sort it out with the generation from which you came a little bit too. We're just going to lay this one sentence platform here. When you reach the place where the sorting out that you're doing is between your bag of marbles and your inner being's bag of marbles, now clarity starts coming to you, and so does empowerment, and so does positive influence. So a lot to think about there. Those of you who are not sitting in the hot seat could hear it more easily. Esther said to someone the other day, you know, when you're in pain, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain, when something's really happening in your life, that's not the time to really try to fix your bag of marbles, because the law of attraction is responding so powerfully to your point of attraction that there's a headwind coming at you that you can't see past, but it will lift off of you because you don't maintain that specific focus all the time. And when it does lift up off of you, then all the wonderful things that you ask for while you were in pain, that you put into your vortex, that your inner being is now focused upon, when it lifts up off of you because of distraction or whatever, you'll be gathered as a cooperative component into this broader understanding. And oh, that feels so good. We want to hear you out. We don't mean in any way to cut you off, because everybody's living versions of some of this, and that really is what this gathering is all about.
So on the refrigerator it said, in today's world, a woman has to work twice as hard as a man to be considered half as good. Fortunately, it isn't difficult. That's what the thing said.
Oh, well, good. So she came around to fortunately, it isn't difficult. So the plaque that she agreed with stated her dispute. You have to be twice as good and work twice as hard.
Right.
And then revenge came forth, which felt better than the powerlessness. And she took a crack against the dumb, stupid men.
And I was, at 5 years old, one of those dumb, stupid men. So
can you remember how that felt? You probably can't.
I can. I can remember it really well.
How did it feel?
Well, it was a funny thing about
Were you
the household.
old enough to really understand the twisted essence of that?
No, not in its subtlety, but I knew that I was one, or I was going to become one. And I could see how my dad treated her, and I could see how a lot of men treated women, and I thought it just didn't make any sense. And I knew that's not what I wanted to be.
So the fact that it just didn't make sense, what do you think was at play there? The relationship between you and your inner being was at play there, when that just didn't make any sense. In other words, you could study that your entire life. You could write 500 books yourself or read 5,000 books yourself about it. And you will never sort out the disagreements between men and women, or men and men, or religions and religions, or politicians and politicians, because everybody gets to have their perspective and everybody gets to play out what the law of attraction brings to that perspective. But also everybody gets to play out what makes sense and what doesn't, what feels good and what doesn't, what brings clarity and what doesn't, what brings pain and what brings joy. Your guidance system has always been there.
Okay, so my mother taught me,
I learned from my mother's bag of marble influence,
that I should talk about what I felt and that it was okay. And this struck me as a little odd, even as a young boy, because I could see that my dad didn't spend much time. In fact, he actively told me that emotions were things I had no control over, and the best thing to do was just ignore them. But my mother, in addition to showing me this sticker on the refrigerator that essentially told me as a man I was headed for trouble and I was part of the problem, she also taught me that it was good to know what I felt. And so
you're just explaining why your mother proved to herself that women have to work twice as hard.
But I'm winding up to my question, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're getting out ahead of it.
Okay, I want to find out. I guess I'm interested to know, like when I turn on television and I see commercials, go to movies, I see what's coming out of the universities, I see what's going on in newspapers these days. There's a lot of let's empower women. I'm in support of it. I'm a fan. What I'm looking for, what I would like to ask Infinite Intelligence to do is for some clue as to how to talk about encouraging boys. Because I feel like it's kind of not okay now to tell little boys that they're good, to tell them that all the craziness that they feel inside is something that they can manage, that it's something that they can learn to.
We're going to take your mother's conclusions about how it's good to talk about how you feel. We're going to take it to yet another step back level just for a moment, and not to try to complicate all of this, but to simplify it as you hear us out here. Because as humans are sifting and sorting through life and debating and disagreeing and agreeing with each other about a lot of things, there's a overall human consensus that is born within almost everybody that goes something like, all this figuring it out has brought me to this conclusion, and now I would like to teach my conclusion to everyone else. And the thing about that is that your diversity is here for a reason. Now, stay with us, because that's just the basis of this sentence, which is really what we're going for, and this will make sense to you. When you decide that you're going to explain how you feel, that you're going to talk about your feelings, you could be on the upper half of the emotional scale, or you could be on the lower half of the emotional scale. And if you're on the upper half of the emotional scale, while you put more attention on that, then talking about your feelings really benefits you. But if you are feeling like a victim or disadvantaged or taken advantage of or less than, then you're talking about something that your inner being will not go there with you. And so what you're actually doing is learning to calibrate to other people who will calibrate with you, because misery does love company. So does joy love company. In other words, the law of attraction brings that company together. But it doesn't matter who it is that you're sympathizing with or empathizing with. When you do it, the law of attraction brings you evidence of that, which makes you even more and more and more a stronger believer of that. And it isn't until you show yourself how to break free of your own self-imposed bondage that you're even willing to be out in a world with a whole lot of people with a whole lot of different opinions. And friends, that's who you were and how you felt when you decided to come into this body to begin with. Not one of you said, ooh, it's a mixed bag down there, and I don't know. Clean it up before I get there, because if I get there and they're all in an uproar about something, I don't want to deal with that. So get them all in agreement on sex, marriage, money, politics, religion. Just get those things all in alignment, and then I'll come, and as a people who are identical in nature, we will all live happily ever after. And we say, no, you wouldn't. You would be bored, and you would come to an inevitable end because there would not be any contrast for you to make new decisions about. The universe would cease to be, and of course that cannot be because it's not set up that way. And so what it comes down to, and we're going to have as many conversations like this today as the time allows, but what it comes down to, you're going to reach this place where you understand that Esther's friend, she's a comedian on a cruise ship, pink-haired, way fun. And she calls Esther at the end of every cruise that she goes on, that the comedian goes on, and talks about where they were and how beautiful it was and whatever happened that was significant. And she called Esther and said, "Oh, this was the worst cruise." And Esther said, "Oh?" She said, "Yeah, the stage manager did not know what he was doing." And Esther said, And her friend said, "So I had to tell him." And Esther said, "How'd that work out?" She said, "It was terrible. It was terrible. He wasn't having any of it. We just battled the whole time. It was miserable. I couldn't get off that ship fast enough." And so Esther's talking to us about it after. She likes meaty things to chew over. And we said, "Your friend is not the stage manager. She's not the law of attraction either. She is a person on the stage doing her thing. But when she tries to do something that is somebody else's to do, especially when she's unhappy with the way the one who is supposed to be doing it isn't doing it or is doing it, then she's all out of whack with who she is. And that's the reason she had a miserable cruise. She can blame it on that person, and she can let that be the reason. She's arguing for her limitations and using that as the object of her attention. But there's only one thing for her to know. You don't get to choose for everybody. You get to only choose what's in your bag of attraction. And when you choose in keeping with what you've already vetted through life experiences, you come to understand that, like Esther with her teenage grandson, she can get from him what she expects in any moment in time. We're not saying that he might not be in a mood resistant to Esther's happiness. And we're not saying that he might not be happy in a mood when Esther is not. You're all sort of a mixed bag most of the time. But what we are saying is that if you will more and more deliberately align with who you really are, you'll have more and more encounters with more others. When someone decides, when your mother or anybody tells you, it's good to have empathy, it's good to have sympathy, it's good to have understanding of where someone is, this is when we want to say, with the most clarity that we can muster, when you've decided that you want to focus on what is, we want to say, which is it that you're focusing upon? Are you focusing upon the seed in the ground that you can't see anything yet? Are you focused upon the vortex version with the full expansion of it? In other words, it's a good thing to be sensitive. We're not trying to teach you to be insensitive to how people feel. We want you to be considerate. We want you to be considerate, but we don't want you to be so considerate that you calibrate to all the scramble that's going on and forfeit the clarity that you were born to live in the process. Until you come to the place where you acknowledge, I'm more than this me. There's another me who adores me. And when I focus with who I really am, I just see love where I look. I see beauty where I look. I experience deliciousness where I am. And when I focus upon the problems and the troubles, even though they are real, we're not asking you to deny reality. We're asking you which reality that you want to focus upon. Which reality do you want to move toward? The new, the improved, the expanded, or the old, considered, vetted, pushed against? Who are you? Who are you? Are you a creator or a regurgitator? Are you for something or against something? You have to decide, because your inner being is always what you are for. And what you're for is clarity and abundance and well-being and love and upliftment and stability.
It's ironic because I feel so grateful to my mother for so many things.
Yeah, because she was a mixed bag, and so are you. So this is where what we're talking about, look for the easy existing matches. Existing matches to what? Existing matches to what my inner being knows about my mother. The easy ones, not the ones that I struggle with to find. That'll just make you pull against your inner being and push against your mother to justify it. What are the easy existing matches